The bitter wind howled through Walla Walla, Washington Territory, on that gray December morning in 1881, when Nora Keller counted the last silver dollar in her palm and knew it would decide whether she survived the winter or perished like her father had just 3 weeks before. The livestock auction was already underway when she arrived, her thin coat doing little to shield her from the cold that seemed to cut straight through to her bones. Men clustered around the auction platform, their breath forming white clouds as they bid on horses, cattle, and mules. Nora hung back, observing, calculating. She needed something to help her work the small plot of land her father had left her, something strong enough to pull a plow come spring, something that would cost exactly $1 or less. The auctioneer, a portly man named Henderson, called out prices with mechanical efficiency. Everything was going for far more than Nora could afford. A decent horse went for $40. A young ox fetched $35. She watched her hope dwindle with each sale until Henderson gestured toward the last animal of the day. "And here we have this fine mule," he announced, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Strong back, good teeth, just a little stubborn is all." The mule in question was a gray beast with ears that seemed too large for its head and an expression that could only be described as deeply skeptical of the entire proceedings. When Henderson's assistant tried to lead it forward, the mule planted its hooves and refused to budge. "Come on now," the assistant pleaded, pulling on the rope. The mule remained stationary as a boulder. Several men in the crowd laughed. Someone called out, "That animal has got a mean streak, Henderson. Nobody's going to want that trouble." Henderson frowned. "She's just particular. Needs the right handler is all. Who'll start the bidding at $10? Silence. $5. More silence. Men were already turning away, heading toward the warmth of the nearby saloons. $1, Henderson said, his voice resigned. "Someone give me $1 for this mule." Nora's hand shot up before she could think better of it. $1. Henderson looked relieved. "Sold to the young lady. Come settle up, miss." As Nora approached the platform, she heard murmurs behind her. A woman buying livestock alone was unusual enough, but everyone in town knew her father had just died, knew she had nothing. She kept her chin up as she handed over her last dollar, refusing to show how terrified she was. The assistant handed her the rope, looking sympathetic. "Good luck with her, miss. She's a handful." Nora took the rope and turned to face the mule. Up close, the animal was larger than she had expected, standing at least 14 hands high. The mule regarded her with dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to be making their own assessment. "Hello," Nora said softly. "My name is Nora. I suppose we are going to have to figure out how to get along." The mule's ears twitched forward, which Nora chose to interpret as a positive sign. She gave a gentle tug on the rope. The mule did not move. "Please," Nora whispered, aware of the men still watching, some with amusement, others with pity. "I need you to walk with me. It is not far to my father's place. My place now, I suppose." The mule remained planted. Nora felt heat rising to her cheeks despite the cold. She had just spent her last dollar on an animal that would not even walk. What had she been thinking? Desperation made people foolish, and she had just proven that beyond any doubt, having trouble there. The voice came from behind her, deep and tinged with what sounded like genuine concern rather than mockery. Nora turned to find a man watching her, tall and lean with sandy brown hair that needed cutting and gray-green eyes that reminded her of the river in summer. He wore a worn sheepskin coat and a black hat, and there was something in his weathered face that suggested he had seen both hardship and humor in equal measure. He looked to be in his mid-20s, perhaps a few years older than her own 21 years. "She will not move," Nora admitted, seeing no point in pretending otherwise. The man stepped closer, studying the mule with the practiced eye of someone who understood animals. "Mind if I try something?" Nora shook her head. At this point, she would accept any help offered. The man approached the mule slowly, not from the front but from the side, keeping his movements relaxed and unhurried. He did not reach for the rope. Instead, he simply stood there, close enough that the mule could have bitten him if she chose, and began speaking in a low, steady voice. "I know how you feel," he said to the mule. "Being sold off to strangers, nothing familiar left, everything changing whether you want it to or not. It is frightening, makes you want to dig in and refuse to take even one more step into the unknown." Nora felt something catch in her chest. He was not talking to the mule at all, or at least not only to the mule. "But sometimes," the man continued, "the unknown is not there to hurt you. Sometimes it is just another soul in the same situation, trying to find a way forward. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take that first step." He fell silent then, just standing with the mule, his hand resting lightly on her neck. After a long moment, the mule let out a heavy sigh and took one step forward. "There you go," the man said, stepping back. He handed the rope to Nora. "Try now." Nora tugged gently on the rope, hardly daring to hope. The mule took another step, then another. They were walking. Relief flooded through Nora so intensely that she felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. "Thank you. I do not know what you did, but thank you." The man tipped his hat. Just spoke her language. Animals are not so different from people. They need to feel understood. He paused, then said, "I am Wyatt Quinn. I have a small ranch about 2 miles north of town." Nora Keller. She hesitated, then added, "My father had a homestead east of here." "It is mine now. Robert Keller's place." When she nodded, Wyatt's expression softened with understanding. "I heard about his passing. I am sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man. You knew him. We traded work sometimes. He helped me mend fences last spring, and I helped him clear that north field. He spoke of you often. Said you were back east getting an education." Nora felt the familiar ache of grief. "I was teaching at a school in Pennsylvania. When I got word he was sick, I came as quickly as I could, but by the time I arrived..." She could not finish the sentence. "I am sorry you had to come home to that." They stood in silence for a moment, the mule standing quietly between them as the last of the auction crowd dispersed. The sky was heavy with the promise of snow. "I should let you get home before the weather turns," Wyatt said finally. "But if you need any help out at your place, if there is anything that needs doing before winter truly sets in, I would be glad to lend a hand. Your father helped me when I needed it. I would like to return the favor." Pride made Nora want to refuse, to insist she could manage on her own, but practicality won out. "That is very kind of you. To be honest, there is much that needs doing. I have been trying to prepare, but I am one person and the work is..." "I understand. I will come by tomorrow if that suits you. We can see what needs the most urgent attention." "I cannot pay you," Nora said bluntly. "I just spent my last dollar on this mule." Wyatt's expression did not change. "I did not ask for payment. Sometimes neighbors help neighbors because it is the right thing to do." Before Nora could respond, the mule suddenly pulled hard on the rope, nearly yanking it from her hands. The animal had spotted a patch of grass poking through the snow near the edge of the auction yard and was determined to reach it. "Easy now," Nora said, struggling to hold on. Wyatt stepped in smoothly, adding his hands to the rope. Together they managed to redirect the mule, though the animal made her displeasure known with a series of indignant snorts. "You have definitely got yourself a stubborn one," Wyatt said, but there was amusement in his voice rather than criticism. "What are you going to call her?" Nora looked at the mule, at her oversized ears and her determined expression, and said the first thing that came to mind. Constance, because she is certainly constant in her stubbornness. Wyatt laughed, a genuine sound that warmed something in Nora despite the cold. Constance it is. Come on, I will walk with you part way. Make sure Constance here does not give you any more trouble. They set off through the town, the mule walking between them with reasonable docility now that she had resigned herself to the situation. Walla Walla was not large, perhaps 800 souls on a good day, with a main street lined with false-fronted buildings and side streets that quickly gave way to scattered homesteads and farmland. It was a practical place, built by practical people trying to carve lives out of the raw territory. "How long have you had your ranch?" Nora asked as they walked, wanting to fill the silence with something other than her own worried thoughts. 3 years. Bought it with money I saved working cattle drives down in Texas and Wyoming. Always wanted a place of my own, and Washington Territory seemed as good a place as any to put down roots. He glanced at her. It has been harder than I expected, truth be told. The land is good, but working it alone is a challenge. You have no family, not anymore. My parents died when I was 16. Fever took them both within a week of each other. I have been on my own since then. I am sorry. It was a long time ago. You learned to carry it. He paused. Though I suppose grief does not really follow a schedule, does it? Old or new, it weighs the same. Nora appreciated that he did not offer empty platitudes about time healing all wounds or her father being in a better place. The simple acknowledgement of grief's weight felt more honest than anything else anyone had said to her since she had returned. They reached the edge of town where the road split, one branch heading north toward Wyatt's ranch, the other east toward her father's homestead. The wind had picked up, carrying the first few flakes of snow. "I should let you get home," Wyatt said. "Storm is coming in." "Will you be all right the rest of the way? It is only another mile. We will manage." Wyatt nodded but looked uncertain about leaving her. "Keep Constance moving. Do not let her stop and think too much about whether she wants to cooperate, because she will decide she does not. Just steady forward progress." "I will remember that." He tipped his hat again. "I will see you tomorrow then, mid-morning if that suits." "That would be fine, and Wyatt, thank you for your help with Constance and for your kindness. It means more than you might know." Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion Nora could not quite name. "We all need help sometimes. Nothing shameful in that." He turned and headed north, his figure quickly becoming indistinct in the thickening snow. Nora watched him go for a moment, then tugged on Constance's rope. "Come on, girl. Let us go home." The walk to the homestead took longer than anticipated. Constance proved willing to walk but had opinions about the pace, stopping occasionally to investigate something that caught her interest, forcing Nora to employ Wyatt's advice about keeping her moving. By the time the small cabin came into view, Nora's hands were numb and her feet ached with cold. The homestead consisted of the cabin her father had built, a small barn that leaned slightly to the left, a chicken coop that currently housed no chickens, and 40 acres of land, half of it cleared for farming. It was not much, but it was hers, and it represented her father's dreams of building something lasting. Nora led Constance to the barn, which at least offered shelter from the wind. There was old hay in the loft, and she forked some down into a makeshift stall. Constance fell upon it eagerly. "I suppose you have earned that," Nora said, watching the mule eat. "Tomorrow we will have to figure out how to actually work together. I hope you are a quick learner, because I certainly am." She left Constance to her hay and trudged through the deepening snow to the cabin. Inside, it was scarcely warmer than outside. The fire had died to embers while she was gone. Nora coaxed it back to life with shaking hands, feeding it carefully with the wood her father had split before he took sick. Once the fire was burning well, she allowed herself to collapse into the rough-hewn chair her father had made. The enormity of her situation settled over her like a heavy blanket. She had no money, limited supplies, a stubborn mule who might or might not prove useful, and a winter to survive before she could even think about planting crops. She had never farmed before her father took ill. Her mother had died when she was young, and her father had sent her east to live with an aunt, wanting her to have opportunities he could not provide on a frontier homestead. But Nora had always planned to return. She had wanted to make her father proud, to show him that his sacrifice had been worthwhile. She had imagined coming home as a successful teacher, perhaps opening a school in Walla Walla, being able to help him in his later years. Instead, she had come home to bury him and inherit his struggles. The cabin felt empty without him, too quiet except for the wind outside and the crackle of the fire. Nora allowed herself to cry then, something she had not permitted herself to do in town, not where others could see. She cried for her father, for the years they had lost while she was away, for the future they would never have, and for the fear that gnawed at her constantly now, the fear that she would fail, that she would lose this place, that her father's dreams would die with him. When the tears finally subsided, Nora wiped her eyes and stood. Self-pity would not get her through the winter. Work would. She still had potatoes in the root cellar, dried beans, some flour, a little sugar. If she was careful, if she was resourceful, she could make it last. And tomorrow Wyatt Quinn was coming to help. She did not know why a stranger would offer such assistance without expecting payment, but she was too grateful to question it too deeply. Perhaps he had simply meant what he said about neighborly kindness. That was how communities survived out here, was it not? By helping each other through the hard times. She thought about Wyatt as she prepared a simple supper of beans and cornbread. There had been genuine warmth in his eyes when he spoke to her, and the way he had handled Constance showed patience and understanding. He was handsome too, though Nora felt almost guilty noticing that so soon after her father's death. But grief did not make her blind, and there was something compelling about Wyatt Quinn beyond just his appearance. Something steady and true. She ate her supper slowly, making it last, then checked on Constance one more time before bed. The mule was lying down in the hay, looking remarkably comfortable for an animal who had spent the day being difficult. "Tomorrow we start figuring out how to make this work," Nora told her. "I need you to be more than just stubborn. I need you to be useful too." Constance's ear flicked, but otherwise she did not respond. Nora took that as acknowledgement enough and returned to the cabin. That night she dreamed of her father, young and healthy as she remembered him from childhood, and when she woke in the gray dawn light, the grief was fresh again. But there was also something else, something she had not felt in weeks. A small, fragile thread of hope. She dressed quickly in the cold cabin, building up the fire and putting coffee on to boil. The snow had stopped during the night, leaving everything covered in a fresh white blanket. It was beautiful in a harsh way, this winter landscape. And for a moment, Nora allowed herself to simply appreciate it rather than fear what it represented. She was feeding Constance when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Through the barn door, she saw Wyatt approaching on a sturdy bay horse, another horse trailing behind on a lead rope. "Good morning," he called out, dismounting. "I brought some supplies I thought you might need. Hope that is all right." Nora emerged from the barn, brushing hay from her skirt. "Good morning, you did not have to do that." "I know I did not have to, I wanted to." He began untying bundles from the pack horse. "I have some oats here for your mule, a sack of cornmeal, some salt pork, and a few other things. Nothing fancy, just staples." Nora felt her throat tighten. Wyatt, I told you I cannot pay you back. He paused in his work and looked at her directly. Nora, I am not asking you to pay me back. I am asking you to accept help from someone who wants to give it. There is a difference. But why? You barely know me. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on one of the bundles. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. After my parents died, I spent years alone, convinced I did not need anyone. I worked hard, saved money, kept to myself. And I survived. But surviving is not the same as living. The past few years, trying to build something here, I have learned that people need each other. We are not meant to go through this life alone. He met her eyes. Your father understood that. He never hesitated to help when someone needed it. So let me help you. Not because you owe me, not because I expect anything in return, but because it is what decent people do for each other. Nora felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight knot of fear and pride she had been carrying. All right, she said softly. Thank you. They carried the supplies into the cabin together, and Wyatt looked around with the same assessing eye he had given Constance. Roof looks sound. That is good. Chimney is drawing well. But I noticed on my way in that you have got some gaps in the barn walls that need plugging before it gets any colder. Constance will need proper shelter if she is going to stay healthy through winter. I know. I just have not had time to deal with everything that needs doing. That is what I am here for. Show me where your father kept his tools and we can get started. They spent the morning working on the barn, Wyatt showing Nora how to mix mud and straw to chink the gaps between the boards. It was cold work, but not unpleasant. Wyatt talked as they worked, telling her about his ranch, the cattle he was raising, his plans for the future. Nora found herself relaxing in his presence, the conversation flowing easily. You said you were teaching back east, Wyatt said as they took a break to warm their hands. Do you miss it? I miss the children, Nora admitted. I miss feeling useful, feeling like I was making a difference, but I do not miss the city itself. It always felt too crowded, too rushed. I thought I had adapted to it, but being back here, I realize how much I miss the open spaces. Do you think you will teach again? Here in Walla Walla, I mean, perhaps someday. Right now, I need to focus on making this homestead work. My father put everything he had into this land. I want to honor that. She paused. Though I confess I do not entirely know how. I was always better with books than with farming. Wyatt smiled. Lucky for you, farming can be learned, and you have got Constance to help you come spring. As if summoned by her name, Constance appeared in the barn doorway, having apparently let herself out of the stall Nora had secured her in. How did you do that? Nora asked the mule, exasperated. Constance simply looked at her, the picture of innocence. Wyatt laughed. She is clever. You are going to have to stay one step ahead of her. I am beginning to think that may be impossible. They returned to work, and by midday had sealed most of the major gaps in the barn. Nora insisted Wyatt come inside for lunch, and they shared the bread she had baked that morning along with some of the salt pork he had brought. This is good bread, Wyatt said, light and tender. My aunt insisted I learn to cook properly. She said no one would want to marry a woman who could not keep a decent house. Nora felt her cheeks warm. Not that I am looking to marry, I just meant. I know what you meant, Wyatt said gently, saving her from further embarrassment. And for what it is worth, I think there are more important qualities in a person than their ability to bake bread, though this is very good bread indeed. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling warmly. Outside, the sky had cleared to a bright winter blue. Can I ask you something? Nora said finally. Of course. Why did you never marry? You said you have been on your own since you were 16. That is almost 10 years. Surely there have been opportunities. Wyatt considered the question. There have been a few women along the way. Nice enough people, but I suppose I never felt ready to share my life with someone. After my parents died, I built walls around myself, thought that if I did not let anyone too close, I could not be hurt again. He looked at her. But walls that keep out hurt also keep out joy. I have been thinking about that a lot lately. And what have you concluded? That I have been a fool, that life is short and uncertain and spending it alone out of fear is no way to live. He set down his coffee cup. What about you? No beau back in Pennsylvania? Nora shook her head. There was a man, a banker's son. He called on me a few times, spoke of marriage, but I could never imagine a life with him. He was pleasant enough, but there was no real connection between us. I kept thinking there should be more to it than just pleasant conversation and social compatibility. She hesitated. My mother and father, they had something special. I remember watching them together when I was small before she died. The way they looked at each other, the way they could have entire conversations without words. I always hoped I might find that too. That sounds like real love, Wyatt said quietly. Yes, and I decided I would rather be alone than settle for less. Their eyes met across the table, and Nora felt something pass between them, an understanding, a recognition. It was as if they were seeing each other clearly for the first time, not just as helper and helped, but as two people who had walked similar paths of loss and loneliness, and were only now beginning to realize they did not have to walk alone anymore. Wyatt cleared his throat. I should probably get back to work. Still need to check that roof, make sure there are no loose shingles before the next storm. Of course. They worked through the afternoon, Wyatt up on the roof while Nora organized the supplies he had brought. She found herself watching him as he worked, noting the sure way he moved, the care he took with each task. He was a good man, she thought. Genuinely good, not performing goodness for recognition or reward, but simply being decent because it was who he was. As the sun began its early winter descent, Wyatt climbed down from the roof. Everything looks solid up there. You should be fine through the winter. I cannot thank you enough for everything you have done today. It was my pleasure. He hesitated, seeming to gather his courage. Nora, I know this may not be the right time with your father's passing so recent and all, but I would like to continue helping you, not just with chores, but as a friend, someone you can rely on. I would like that very much. And maybe, when enough time has passed, when it feels appropriate, we could. He trailed off, looking uncertain. Nora stepped closer to him. We could what? We could see if there might be something more between us than just neighborly friendship. I know it is presumptuous of me to even suggest it, and you should take all the time you need to grieve and settle in, but I want you to know that I am interested. In getting to know you better, in spending time with you, in seeing where this might lead. The words came out in a rush, as if he had been holding them back all day and they could no longer be contained. Nora felt warmth spread through her chest. That is not presumptuous. It is honest, and I appreciate honesty. She took a breath. I am interested too, Wyatt. I have been thinking about it all day, feeling guilty for thinking about it so soon after losing my father, but unable to stop nonetheless. There is something between us. I felt it yesterday at the auction, and I feel it even more strongly now. Wyatt's face broke into a smile, genuine and unguarded. I felt it too. The moment I saw you struggling with that stubborn mule, something in me just knew. Knew what? That you were going to be important to me, that my life had just changed in a fundamental way. He shook his head. I know that sounds foolish. No, Nora said softly. It sounds exactly right. They stood there in the fading light, snow crunching under their feet, breath visible in the cold air, and Nora felt the fragile thread of hope she had woken with that morning strengthen into something more substantial. She was not alone. She had Constance and she had this land, and now, perhaps, she had Wyatt Quinn over the following weeks, Wyatt became a regular presence at the homestead. He came every few days, always bringing something useful, always finding work that needed doing. He fixed the chicken coop and helped Nora acquire 6 laying hens from a farmer selling off surplus stock. He repaired the plow her father had used, explaining to Nora how it worked and what she would need to do when spring came. He helped her cut and stack firewood, ensuring she would have enough to last the winter. And through it all, they talked. Nora learned about Wyatt's childhood in Missouri, his parents' dreams of going west, their terrible deaths, and his subsequent years of wandering. She learned that he loved reading but had few books, that he played harmonica but only when he was alone, that he had a deep fear of failing at his ranch, of proving unequal to the dream he had invested everything in. Wyatt learned about Nora's education, her love of teaching, her complicated feelings about her time back east. He learned that she could recite poetry from memory, that she was terrible at sewing but excellent at mathematics, that she sometimes woke in the night gripped by panic about the future, but refused to let that fear control her days. They learned each other, slowly and thoroughly, building something real on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. Constance, meanwhile, remained stubbornly herself. She tolerated being led to and from the barn but had opinions about everything else. She refused to let Nora ride her and had a particular talent for escaping any enclosure Nora created. But she also began following Nora around like a large, contrary dog, appearing at unexpected moments to investigate what Nora was doing. "She likes you," Wyatt observed one afternoon as Constance nosed at Nora's pocket, looking for the apple pieces Nora had taken to carrying. "She likes apples," Nora corrected, feeding Constance a piece. "I am merely the delivery system." "No, she likes you. See how her ears are forward when you are around, how she positions herself between you and anything she perceives as threatening. She has adopted you." Nora looked at Constance with new understanding. "I suppose we have adopted each other. That is generally how it works with the stubborn ones. They choose you as much as you choose them." It was mid-January when the worst storm of the winter hit. Snow fell for 3 days straight, piling in drifts against the cabin and barn. Nora kept the fire burning and rationed her supplies carefully, checking on Constance multiple times each day. The mule seemed unbothered by the weather, content in her hay-filled stall. On the 3rd day, when the snow finally stopped, Nora woke to find the world transformed into an endless expanse of white. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. She had never seen so much snow. She was shoveling a path to the barn when she heard a shout. Wyatt appeared, leading his horse through the deep snow, both of them covered in white. "I had to make sure you were all right," he called out. "The snow is over 3 feet deep in places." Nora felt her heart lift at the sight of him. "I am fine. Constance is fine. We have been riding out the storm." Wyatt reached her, his face red with cold but smiling. "I should have known you would manage. You are tougher than you look." "I had no choice but to manage, but I am glad you are here now." He helped her finish shoveling, then they checked on Constance together. The mule greeted Wyatt with what Nora could only describe as enthusiasm, nuzzling at his pockets until he produced a carrot. "You spoil her," Nora said. "Someone has to. She works hard in her way." "She has not worked at all. She refuses to pull anything. Give her time. She is still figuring out if she can trust you completely." They returned to the cabin, and Nora made coffee while Wyatt built up the fire. It felt natural, having him there, moving around her space as if he belonged. "I was worried about you," Wyatt admitted as they sat together, warming their hands on coffee cups. 3 days is a long time to be alone in a storm like that. "I thought about you too. Hoped you were safe at your ranch." "I was safe, but I was not at ease." Could not stop thinking about you out here alone. He set down his cup and turned to face her fully. Nora, we have been dancing around this for weeks now, and I think it is time I spoke plainly. I am in love with you. Nora's breath caught. She had hoped, had suspected, but hearing the words spoken aloud was different. I know it is fast, Wyatt continued. I know there are reasons we should wait, should take more time. But I have wasted too many years already, and I do not want to waste any more. I love you. I love your strength and your intelligence, and the way you talk to that stubborn mule like she is a person. I love how you never complain about how hard things are, even though they are very hard. I love your laugh and your determination and the way you recite poetry when you think no one is listening. You heard that last week when I was fixing the fence. You were in the barn with Constance, reciting Wordsworth. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. He reached for her hand. I want to court you properly if you will let me. I want to build a life with you. And I know that probably sounds insane, talking about the future when we have barely survived winter, but I have never been more certain of anything. Nora felt tears gathering in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. I love you too. I have been trying to tell myself it was too soon, that I should focus on grieving and surviving and getting through the winter. But my heart would not listen to reason. I love you, Wyatt Quinn. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Nora did not want to pull away. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was tender and careful and full of promise. When they parted, Wyatt was grinning. I have wanted to do that for weeks. I have wanted you to do that for weeks. Then we have been a pair of fools waiting. Perhaps, or perhaps the waiting made it sweeter. They spent the rest of the day together, talking about the future with an openness they had not permitted themselves before. Wyatt spoke of his dream to expand his ranch, to build it into something substantial that could support a family. Nora spoke of her desire to teach again someday, perhaps to open a school that could serve the children of the homesteaders and ranchers scattered around Walla Walla. We could combine our land, Wyatt suggested. Your 40 acres and my 60. That would give us 100 acres total. Enough to really build something substantial. Are you proposing a business merger or something more personal? Nora asked, teasing. I am proposing whatever you want it to be, but I would prefer something more personal. He grew serious. I want to marry you, Nora, not today, not even this month. But when you are ready, when enough time has passed that it feels right, I want you to be my wife. Nora felt joy bubble up inside her, bright and unexpected. I want that too. Then it is settled. We will build a life together. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, they did exactly that. Wyatt moved some of his cattle to Nora's land, using both properties as a single unit. They worked together to prepare the fields for planting, Wyatt teaching Nora everything she needed to know about farming in Washington Territory. And Constance, finally deciding she was ready to participate, allowed herself to be hitched to the plow. I think she just needed to see that we were serious, Wyatt said as the mule pulled the plow with reasonable cooperation. That we were committed to staying. She is wiser than both of us then. She knew all along we belonged together. On a warm day in late March, 3 months after Nora had bought Constance at the winter auction, Wyatt rode up to the homestead with a purposeful expression. Nora was in the garden, planting the first seeds of the season, and she stood to greet him, wiping dirt from her hands. I have something for you, Wyatt said, dismounting. He looked nervous, which was unusual for him. What is it? He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. This was my mother's, the only thing I have left of hers. I have been carrying it around for 10 years, never knowing what to do with it. But now I know. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small ruby. It is not fancy, Wyatt said. My father was not a rich man. But he loved my mother, and she loved this ring because he gave it to her. Nora felt tears gather in her eyes. Wyatt, I know we talked about waiting, about taking our time, but I do not want to wait anymore. Life is uncertain. We have both learned that the hard way. So I am asking you now, Nora Keller, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and building a future with you and arguing with that stubborn mule of yours? Nora laughed through her tears. Yes, yes, I will marry you. Wyatt slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, right there in the garden with the seeds she had just planted and the wide spring sky above them. I promise I will make you happy, Wyatt said when they finally parted. You already have. From the moment you helped me with Constance at that auction, you have been making me happy. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony in Walla Walla, with Constance serving as witness, standing patiently outside the church while the minister performed the service. A few neighbors attended, including the farmer who had sold Nora the laying hens and Henderson the auctioneer, who seemed pleased that his worst sale of the winter auction had led to such a happy outcome. That mule brought you good fortune after all, Henderson told Nora at the small reception afterward. The best fortune, Nora agreed, looking at Wyatt across the room. They combined their households, choosing to live in Wyatt's larger ranch house, but keeping Nora's cabin for storage, and as a reminder of where their story had begun. Constance moved to Wyatt's barn, where she presided over the other animals with an air of supreme superiority. The first year of their marriage was not easy. Farming never was. There were droughts and pest infestations and the constant challenge of making the land produce enough to sustain them. But there were also triumphs. The crops they had planted together yielded a decent harvest. Wyatt's cattle herd grew. Nora started teaching reading and arithmetic to children from neighboring homesteads, meeting them twice a week in her old cabin. And through it all, their love deepened and strengthened, tested by hardship but never broken. It was in the fall of their first year of marriage that Nora realized she was pregnant. She told Wyatt one evening as they sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over their combined land. "We are going to have a baby," she said simply. Wyatt turned to her, his expression transforming from tired to joyful in an instant. "Truly, truly, by my calculations, sometime in late spring." He pulled her into his arms, careful and tender. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. "I am terrified and thrilled and grateful and overwhelmed." He pulled back to look at her. "Are you happy?" "Yes. I did not expect to be, not so soon, but yes, I am incredibly happy." The pregnancy progressed well, though Nora found herself exhausted in a way she had never experienced before. Wyatt took over more of the physical labor, insisting she rest, and Nora discovered she was too tired to argue. Her students' mothers brought her food and advice, and she found herself welcomed into a community of women she had not known existed. In May of 1883, on a warm spring day much like the one on which Wyatt had proposed, Nora gave birth to a healthy boy. They named him Robert after her father. Wyatt held his son with a mixture of awe and terror, looking to Nora for reassurance. "Am I doing this right? There is no right way. There is just our way." Little Robert proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who rarely cried but required constant attention. Nora found motherhood both harder and more rewarding than she had anticipated. Wyatt was a devoted father, taking his turn with nighttime feedings and diaper changes without complaint. "My father used to say that raising children was the most important work a person could do," Wyatt told Nora one sleepless night as they both tried to soothe a fussy Robert. "I did not understand what he meant then. I do now." Constance, surprisingly, proved very interested in the new addition to the family. She would stand at the fence of her paddock whenever Nora brought Robert outside, watching with her large, intelligent eyes, her ears forward with interest. "I think she approves," Wyatt said. "Of course she does. She has excellent taste." As Robert grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Wyatt and Nora worked hard, saving money, slowly building up their herd and improving their land. Nora continued teaching, now bringing Robert with her to the lessons, and several of the neighbor women began talking about building a proper schoolhouse. When Robert was 2, Nora became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, and she spent the last 2 months on bed rest while Wyatt juggled caring for Robert, running the ranch, and worrying about his wife. Their daughter was born on a cold November day, smaller than Robert had been but healthy and strong. They named her Constance after the mule who had brought them together. "She's going to hate us for that when she is older," Nora said, holding baby Constance while Mule Constance watched through the window. "She's going to love it. Constance is a survivor. Our daughter will be too." True to her namesake, baby Constance proved stubborn from the start, refusing to sleep when she was supposed to and demanding attention on her own schedule. But she was also affectionate and quick to smile, and both Wyatt and Nora fell completely in love with her. The years passed with the rhythm of seasons and the chaos of young children. Robert grew into a serious boy who loved animals and followed his father everywhere. Constance the younger was wild and fearless, climbing trees and racing across the fields before she was barely old enough to walk properly. And Constance the mule, now growing older, remained a constant presence, still stubborn but also gentle with the children, allowing them to pet her and feed her treats, though she would not allow anyone but Nora or Wyatt to lead her. In 1888, when Robert was 5 and Constance 3, Nora and Wyatt achieved a long-held dream. With money they had saved and a loan from a Walla Walla bank, they built a proper schoolhouse on their land. It was small but well constructed, with big windows to let in light and a good stove for heat. Nora began teaching full-time, and children from homesteads within a 5-mile radius attended. Wyatt was immensely proud. "You did it. You made your dream real." "We did it," Nora corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you." On their 6th wedding anniversary, Wyatt surprised Nora with a gift. He led her outside to find a brand new buggy, well-made and sturdy. "For the teacher," he said. "So you do not have to walk everywhere or rely on that stubborn mule." Nora laughed. "Constance will be offended." "Constance has had her time in the spotlight. This is for you." But when Nora tried to harness one of their horses to the buggy, Constance appeared from nowhere and positioned herself between the shafts, clearly indicating that this was her job. "I guess she is not ready to retire after all," Wyatt said, laughing. And so Constance pulled Nora's buggy to the schoolhouse twice a week, still stubborn but also reliable, still contrary but also loyal. More years passed. Robert started attending his mother's school, proving to be a bright student with his mother's love of learning. Little Constance was more interested in the ranch work, following her father and learning about cattle and land management. In 1890, Nora gave birth to another son whom they named William. He was a quiet baby, thoughtful even from infancy, and Nora saw something of her father in him. The ranch continued to grow. Wyatt's careful management and hard work paid off, and they became one of the more successful operations in the area. They were able to hire help during busy seasons, taking some of the burden off themselves. Nora's school gained a reputation for excellence, and several of her former students went on to attend university, a source of enormous pride for her. Through it all, Nora and Wyatt's love remained strong. They had their disagreements, their hard times, moments when money was tight or the children were sick, or the weather destroyed crops. But they faced everything together, always coming back to the foundation they had built in that first winter when a stubborn mule and a kind cowboy had brought them together. On a summer evening in 1895, Nora and Wyatt sat on their porch watching their 3 children play in the yard. Robert was 12 now, tall and lanky, helping 7-year-old Constance build something out of scrap wood. 5-year-old William was attempting to befriend a barn cat with limited success. "You remember the winter auction?" Nora asked. "Every detail," Wyatt said. "You standing there with that stubborn mule, looking terrified but trying so hard to be brave. I thought I had made a terrible mistake, spending my last dollar on an animal who would not even walk. Best dollar you ever spent." "Best dollar I ever spent," Nora agreed. "It bought me Constance and brought me you." Wyatt took her hand. "I would have traded you my heart for free, you know. You never needed to buy anything. I was yours from the moment I saw you." Nora leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their children, their land, the life they had built together. "I think Constance knew somehow. I think she was waiting for both of us." As if summoned by her name, the old mule appeared from around the barn, moving slower now than she had 14 years ago, but still with that same determined expression. She walked up to the porch and stood there, looking at Nora and Wyatt with those intelligent dark eyes. "Hello, old friend," Nora said softly. "Thank you for bringing us together." Constance's ears twitched forward, and for a moment Nora could swear the mule was smiling. Then she turned and walked away, heading for her favorite grazing spot in the south pasture. The years continued to unfold. Robert went to university in Seattle, studying agriculture so he could return and help expand the ranch. Constance the younger married a neighboring rancher's son and started her own homestead with her husband. William became a teacher like his mother, eventually taking over the school when Nora decided to retire. Constance the mule lived to the remarkable age of 28, finally passing peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1909. Nora and Wyatt buried her in the south pasture, under a tree she had loved to stand beneath in summer, and placed a marker there. "She changed everything," Nora said, tears streaming down her face despite Constance's advanced age. "I would not have any of this without her." "She was a good mule," Wyatt said, his own voice thick with emotion. "Stubborn as anything, but good." They stood together at the grave, holding hands as they had for nearly 3 decades, and said goodbye to the animal who had brought them together. Life went on as it always does. Grandchildren arrived, first from Constance the younger, then from Robert, and finally from William. The ranch continued to prosper under Robert's management, expanding to nearly 500 acres. Nora's school became an institution, training teachers who went on to open schools across Washington, which had become a state in 1889. Nora and Wyatt grew old together, their hair turning gray, their movements slowing, but their love remaining constant. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over the land they had built together. In 1925, 44 years after that winter auction in Walla Walla, Wyatt passed away quietly in his sleep at the age of 68. Nora held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering that she loved him, that she would always love him. She lived 3 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still sharp and engaged with the world. She told stories of the old days, of buying a stubborn mule with her last dollar, of a kind cowboy who had offered to help a desperate woman, of building a life from nothing but love and determination. On a spring morning in 1928, Nora Keller Quinn passed away at the age of 68, the same age Wyatt had been. Her children buried her beside him on the ranch they had built together, under the wide Washington sky they had both loved. On her headstone, along with her name and dates, they inscribed a line she had often repeated: "The best dollar I ever spent." And years later, when visitors asked about the unusual grave marker in the south pasture, shaped like a mule, Robert would tell them the story of Constance, the stubborn mule who had brought his parents together, who had been present at their wedding, who had carried his mother to her schoolhouse for years, who had been, in her way, the foundation on which the entire Quinn family had been built. "Some people think it is silly," Robert would say, "to honor a mule that way, but my mother always said Constance was the wisest creature she ever knew. She saw what my parents needed before they saw it themselves, and she brought them together. That seems worth remembering." The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, always worked with the same care and dedication that Wyatt and Nora had shown. The schoolhouse became a historical landmark, preserved as an example of early education in Washington state. And the story of the stubborn mule and the cowboy who traded his heart became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the best investments are the ones that seem foolish at the time. On that winter day in 1881, when Nora Keller spent her last dollar on a stubborn mule, she could not have imagined the life that would unfold from that desperate choice. She could not have known that the cowboy who helped her would become the love of her life, her partner, her best friend. She could not have foreseen the children and grandchildren, the prosperous ranch, the school that would educate hundreds of children, the full and beautiful life that would bloom from that single moment of desperate hope. But Constance the mule, stubborn and wise, perhaps knew all along. She had stood in that auction yard, refusing to move for anyone, until the right person came along. And when Nora appeared, frightened and determined in equal measure, Constance had recognized something, some quality that said this human was worth the effort. And she had been right. In the end, it was not just a story about a woman who bought a mule or a cowboy who offered his heart. It was a story about recognizing worth when others could not, about having faith in the face of uncertainty, about building something lasting from the smallest beginnings. It was about love in all its forms, the love between husband and wife, parent and child, human and animal, neighbors and community. It was a story about home, about finding where you belong and who you belong with, about second chances and new beginnings, about the stubborn persistence required to build a life and the grace required to appreciate it. And it all began with one stubborn mule, one last dollar, and one cowboy who looked at a desperate woman and saw not someone to pity, but someone to love.